Hello, beloveds, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, a podcast for those who are survivors of childhood trauma, emotional neglect, and narcissistic abuse. This podcast is hosted by Rachel Leroy, a college professor and trauma survivor. Many of us spend years trying to heal and don't get anywhere. We don't always target the trauma itself, which is so often what keeps us stuck. This podcast is where faith meets science. Rachel is an emotional healing expert with 20 years of experience applying healing modalities that helped her start making progress after nothing else worked. She'll show you how to do the same. Each week, we'll cover a topic that will show you how to heal trauma for good. Please check out our website and show notes at ChristianEmotionalRecovery.com and join the Facebook community, Trauma Survivors Unite, Christian Emotional Recovery.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of season 2 of Christian Emotional Recovery. I'm your host, Rachel Leroy, and this episode is a YouTube video that I have put out recently that is repurposed for this week's episode. I apologize that I do that sometimes. Towards the end of the year, I get very busy with school. I get very busy with the podcast, the YouTube channel, and I'm trying to build a platform. So I'm taking some of these and repurposing them. Generally speaking, the YouTube channel and the podcast episodes are separate material. So if you haven't, go ahead and go to the YouTube channel. You can see a link below in the show notes and subscribe to it. And this episode is 10 ways you can set healthy boundaries. So this episode is 10 ways to set healthy boundaries, and this is a repurposed YouTube. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And first, though, I wanted to let you know that I have a store opened. Check out ChristianEmotionalRecovery.com. It has a link to the store. I'll also link the store in the show notes below, and anything that you purchase in the store helps me to put money back into the podcast. It helps me to continue to run this platform and to expand it, and it allows me to help you and even more other people like you who are trauma survivors. I will be putting out more courses that I've created in the past. I will also be creating courses in the future, and I will also be putting out more meditations. Right now I have a meditation bundle that you can get for $12. So go check it out and see what's there and see what resources might be able to help you even more than just the podcast and the YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and jump into episode 18, season 2, 10 ways to set healthy boundaries based on the YouTube video. Hello, everyone, and I am Rachel Leroy. I am the host of the YouTube channel, Christian Emotional Recovery, and I am also the host of the podcast, Christian Emotional Recovery, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And I also I'm the administrator of Christian Emotional Recovery, the Facebook group. So if you haven't gone to and joined any of those, click the link below and you can subscribe to any of those and join those. And today, though, I wanted to talk about ways to set healthy boundaries. Ooh, that's a good one, right? The name of this podcast is 10 Ways to Set Healthy Boundaries. Ways to set healthy boundaries. And I'm using some sources on this one, and I'm going to actually read a little bit from them, but I've got a pretty extensive talk here in my computer, so bear with me if I read off a little bit. I like to look you in the eye, so to speak, but sometimes I need to read as well because there's a lot of text, so bear with me. I'm going to look at my computer a little bit. But setting healthy boundaries, there are some resources that I would recommend you use. And I've included here, and I'm using here, a couple of articles. One of them is 10 Ways to Build and Preserve Better Boundaries in Psych Central by Shannon Martin, and she has a degree in social work. And then there is a I don't know if you've heard of Henry Cloud, but there's a book I highly recommend. I'll put it in the show notes. It's called Setting Boundaries. There's more of the title, but it's Setting Boundaries, but it's by Henry Cloud and Peter Townsend. Henry Cloud and Peter Townsend. And I've actually got a video here. He's one of the foremost, they're Christian authors. It's a Christian book. But it's so popular that it's even read a lot in the secular world. So that's how reputable this book is and how good the book is. I've read it. It's very good. And Henry Cloud, I've got a video that I will also link below that I got some ideas from called How to Set Boundaries. It's on YouTube. And, the last resource that I'm using today is How to Set Boundaries, 5 Ways to Draw the Line Politely by Logan Bailey on Science of People. And I'll be using some quotations from that one as well, and I wanted to credit my sources. So first, I want to talk about what a boundary is. And another source in Psych Central says boundaries create physical and emotional space between you and others. They show people how you want to be treated, what's okay with you, and what's not. So that's what a boundary is. And then Cloud, his video talks a little bit more about boundaries, and he uses a metaphor, property lines as a metaphor. Now, if you own property, or even if you just live in an apartment, he talks about the fact that we have boundaries in our property. Somebody can't just legally come through your door and walk into your house without permission and without letting you know. If you have a yard, your neighbor, unless you know them really well and it's understood and you trust each other, they don't just barge into your property and come into your yard without a good reason. Like if their dog runs over or something, they might come and get their dog, but you know what I mean. Overall, that's just not something that is allowed. And the thing is people in the United States, a lot of unhealthy people tend to respect property boundaries more than personal boundaries. But just like property has boundaries that people need to respect, our own selves have boundaries as well. Our physical bodies, our emotions, our relationships, our minds have boundaries that need to be respected as well. Does that mean we have a wall up and we keep everybody out? No, it's more like a screen or a filter. But Cloud uses that metaphor very well, and I encourage you to watch the video. It's like 8 minutes or less. But he says, we have these boundaries ourselves in our relationships, and it isn't selfish. It's healthy. It's healthy. And we should have healthy and kind boundaries around our bodies, our minds, our time, our mental health, and our physical space. Boundaries are part of daily life. They're not mean. They're more there than you ever realize. Boundaries are about our responsibilities to ourselves, but also our responsibilities to others. And so, for example, if you say yes to everyone, you can't take care of what is most important to you because you'll be overwhelmed, resentful, and burnt out. So you have to set boundaries and say no. If you allow someone to abuse you, not only is that obviously bad for you, but it can enable others to think it's okay to abuse you. And if you're like, well, I'll just take it because, you know what, I don't care about myself. Well, I hope you care about yourself more after watching this video. But think about this. If they abuse you and you enable it and you don't set a boundary, that's not your fault. That's them. Okay, that's them. But that will make them think that they can go abuse other people too. So think about it that way as well. But also, like I said, that isn't to blame you, but to show that you can hold other people accountable. And sometimes we set boundaries with others to protect our children, our property, our pets, our time, whatever the case may be. And nobody's going to blame somebody for protecting those, right? And Cloud's video, though, is helpful to see how property lines are like our own personal agency, our autonomy, and our individuality as human beings. And then now in the Science of People article, that's one of the last ones that I was talking about, there is a list of things we can set boundaries around. And some of those, it says, are emotional energy, time, personal space, sexuality, morals and ethics, material possessions and finances, and social media. So those are things that we have to protect ourselves from, and things that are ours, that we have ownership, that are ours, that we have a right to say yes and say no and set boundaries around and expect people to respect. And that is not only okay, that is morally right. It's biblical. And then boundaries we can set, people we can set boundaries with, and these are just some: family, friends, romantic relationships, co-workers, and strangers. And I would add neighbors to that because I've had to do that before too. And then a little bit more about boundaries. Set boundaries with people who are unhealthy and abusive. That's really important. Not only is this okay, but it's healthy. It's healthy. If you love someone, you don't enable abuse, addiction, dysfunction, and neglect. That's not love. Everyone has responsibility to those in their lives, and loving others is often setting a boundary and saying no in these circumstances. For example, a loving parent doesn't just give in to their kid when they pitch a tantrum. They're like, that's not okay. And then if it's a younger child, you might put them in the corner and let them sort of calm down, and then talk to them and ask them why they were put in the corner. And you get the idea. That's a very sort of not funny, it's not funny, but it's a silly kind of example, but you get what I'm saying. Some people do act like grown children though. But loving others is often about setting a boundary and saying no in certain circumstances, and they may not like it, but stand firm and be kind. I know, easier said than done, right? So, what are reasons we don't set boundaries? To be able to set boundaries, you need to know why you might struggle with setting a boundary. So I'm going to go look at the Psych Central article. The Psych Central article has reasons, a list of reasons we might not set a boundary. And so, why are you afraid to set boundaries? It says people avoid setting boundaries for many reasons, but fear is the biggest reason. And some of those fears are fear of angering people. Guilty. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being seen as difficult or selfish, and some people will even tell you you're not, fear of being mean, and fear of ruining relationships. So I'm not going to do a lot of commentary on those, but I'll just leave those there for you to think about. Now, it can be hard to set boundaries. I've been there. I used to not speak up when I didn't want to do something or wanted to do something, depending on the situation, even sometimes with kindly people, and I would resent the situation later. The thing is, only you can tell people what you need or want, or what you don't need or don't want. That's a hard truth, but there it is. And there's a good chance you'll be met with anger from some people. If somebody's a good friend or they love you, they're not going to get angry at you every time you set a boundary. But if somebody is manipulative or selfish or narcissistic, they might get pissed off when you set a boundary. Pardon my language, but that's how they'll act. And you need to prepare yourself and expect that, and still be able to stand firm, but be kind. And if they try to argue with you, don't argue with them. Just be like, this is what I'm going to do. And don't explain. Don't give them a reason. Just be like, that's it. And be kind. So, I know it's hard to set a boundary. It is hard. And like I said, you could be met with disappointment with even healthy and kind people, but people who truly care about you will understand. And that's how sometimes you can differentiate if it's a consistent pattern between people that care about you and people that don't care about you. Codependents especially struggle with boundaries. I'm a recovering codependent. I know what that's like. And codependency is a relationship without boundaries where two parties get enmeshed, meaning the boundaries are not there. That might mean you say anything, you do anything, you barge into their space, and there's just no boundaries. But even intimate relationships need to have healthy boundaries. That's unhealthy. Often one person in the relationship takes advantage of the giving nature of the other, and the giver doesn't know how to say no, and this becomes a toxic dynamic. Usually the giver is a codependent and fears what will happen if they set boundaries, of, like in my case, where I didn't have a lot of good examples of setting boundaries in my life. I had people that were completely abusive and overbearing, and then people that were completely just rolled over and took it. And there wasn't a lot of balance there. So when I did try to set a boundary, the funny thing is if you're in that environment, the thought never even occurs to you that you can set a boundary until these teachings are like, you can set a boundary. And you're like, no, I can't. Yes, you can. No, I can't. Yes, you can. No, I can set a boundary? Really? Me? Yes, you. You can set a boundary. I literally did not know that I could set a boundary. That's how messed up your thinking can be when you're in that environment. I felt like I was selfish. I was even told I was selfish. Not selfish to set a healthy boundary. It's actually good if it's healthy. And if you're still a loving and good and kind person that wants to help people, you still have to set boundaries with people. But nothing could be further from the truth. It is okay to set boundaries. It is okay. It really is. Now, there's a list in the Science of People article that differentiates between someone with healthy boundaries and someone who does not have healthy boundaries. So if you are completely tangled up in this kind of mess, I know what it's like to not even know my head from my feet in this situation and be turned completely upside down and thinking things are selfish that are not and things that are not selfish are. So let me set the record straight by reading this list here from the Science of People. And this gives you a chart and it's split down the middle. And signs of healthy boundaries and signs of potential unhealthy boundaries. And I'm going to read that list. Healthy, protect yourself from getting taken advantage of. Unhealthy, vulnerable to being used or taken advantage of. Healthy, on your own time, owns your own time. Boundaries, unhealthy, overcommit your time to others and leave little time for yourself. Healthy, high self-esteem and self-respect. Unhealthy, lower self-esteem and critical inner dialogue. Healthy, prioritize time for yourself. Unhealthy, give a lot of their time to other people. That's not to say you shouldn't give time to other people. We're commanded by God to love others, and that means helping others and making time and energy to do that. But you have to find some balance. If that's all you're ever doing is helping others and you don't have time for yourself and that's an excuse, you need to reevaluate your priorities a little bit. Healthy, you only take on responsibilities you can handle. You don't overcommit yourself. Unhealthy, feeling exhausted or burnt out by overwhelming commitments and responsibilities. Healthy, authentically say no if you don't have the energy or capacity to do something. Unhealthy, have a hard time saying no. Healthy, set limits on others without feeling bad. You do that with your children if you have to. I'm not saying adults are children, but you can do that with anybody. That doesn't mean you're like an authority over them, but setting boundaries is okay with other adults. Having a hard time saying no, feeling guilty for expressing boundaries is unhealthy. Healthy, strong sense of identity and direction. That's where you have agency and autonomy. That's where you have boundaries around your body and your mind and your emotions and your health. And you protect those. And unhealthy, change yourself to fit with different people. Healthy, take care of your own problems and understand that you cannot heal other people's issues for them. So that's taking responsibility for your side of the street. Unhealthy, unhealthy, take on other people's problems as your own. You cannot fix other people. I will say it again. You cannot fix other people. And if you think you're going to save a relationship by trying to fix somebody or change them, you're going to be very disappointed. And that sucks. I wish we could fix other people. We can pray for them. We can be kind to them. But we also need to set boundaries and know that we cannot fix another able-bodied, able-minded adult. They have to want to change. And just because you want them to change or tell them how you feel, you can tell them how you feel. That's fine. But they're not going to change unless they want to. And I'm still struggling with that too. I still struggle with that, but I'm better. I'm getting better. Last one, healthy. You clearly communicate your needs and wants. You prioritize your self-care. Unhealthy. You put other people's needs and wants before your own. I was actually taught that it's better to put other people's wants and needs before your own, and that there was something wrong with taking care of yourself. There is not. You can put other people's needs and wants before your own at times, but there are also times you need to put your own needs and wants first as well. You can do both at different times, but as you get more mature at this and better at this, you will learn to know when which is which, okay? So that's the list from Science of Mind article. The article's in the show notes, so you can read that. 10 ways to set healthy boundaries. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about and set a foundation for setting healthy boundaries. And so I want to just go through 10 specific strategies to help you to set healthy boundaries. And I'm using some of the sources from the articles, and I kind of mixed it up and added my own ideas here. So I'll put the sources to credit them. I also named them at the beginning to give credit. I'm an English teacher. I have had to discipline a lot of people for plagiarism. I'm all about giving source credit, and I'm very strong about that, about ethics and all that. So check out the articles in the show notes, but also read those articles. They'll help you. That's why I put them there as well. So here are the 10 ways to set healthy boundaries. Bear with me. Like I said, I'm going to read off a little bit since there's a lot of text here and I can't just remember it if it's not as brief. Okay, 10 ways to set healthy boundaries. 1, be clear and specific about your boundaries when you communicate them. Be clear and specific about your boundaries when you communicate them. So if you don't want A, say you don't want A. If you want B, say you want B to the other person or from the other person. You can be direct and still be kind. So if you cannot do something, say so. If you can do something later but not at the time specified, say so and specify when, or say I'll get back to you and then tell them when you get back to them. So read the clear boundaries chart again from the Science of People source to help you reiterate this point and drive it home, and that'll kind of get in your mind a little more. The next one. Don't assume people know your boundaries. People cannot read your mind. Even if you think they know, if you're not explicitly sure that they know, don't assume. Openly communicate your boundaries with appropriate parties in appropriate situations. Okay? That's number 2. Number 3, in ways to set healthy boundaries. Use a neutral tone when setting boundaries. Use a neutral tone when setting boundaries. You don't have to be ugly. You don't have to be pleading, just be matter of fact, be kind, be firm, and just regular tone. And if somebody wants you to explain yourself, you do not have to give an explanation if you don't want to. Just be neutral, say that's it, and that's the end of it. When setting boundaries, number 4, when setting boundaries, be led by God. When setting boundaries, be led by God. If there is a conflict between what is right or obeying what you believe God is saying or what you know is biblical, and something or someone else is in conflict, do what is right and what God is telling you to do. Listen to that gut feeling in your being. It's biblical because the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And that also goes good with the first one. Be clear and specific about your boundaries when you communicate them. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then the next one, number 6. Number 6 out of 10 is when setting, that was the one before. Consider others' needs and boundaries as well. Consider others' needs and boundaries as well. So if we set healthy boundaries with others and expect to have those respected, they should be no matter what, but also respect others' healthy boundaries as well. If somebody sets a boundary with you and it's healthy, then don't pitch a fit. Try to be kind, try to be understanding. I've been disappointed and sometimes it's hard, but you try to respect other people's boundaries when they're healthy and reasonable. If you've been abused, it can be confusing to know what boundaries are healthy and what aren't, because there are abusive boundaries that are too rigid. And so that's why reading articles here and those like them, educating yourself by reading books like Clouds, practicing what you learn in the videos and in the books, and that will help you to start to see what healthy boundaries are, start to set healthy boundaries, and start to know the difference between a healthy boundary and an unhealthy boundary, what's too much and what's not enough. And it will vary from situation to situation, so it'll take some time to learn that, but you can and you will. But you know why? Because I had no zero, zilch, nada sense of boundaries. And I've since been able to understand that a lot better and follow through on it. So a little bit more about that. You'll know if someone is taking care of themselves or doing something wrong. There's a difference. Not getting angry, being understanding, negotiating reasonably when there's a disagreement on a specific boundary with a reasonable person, keywords there. Being honest about how you feel and not emotionally dumping on close relationships at random times or ways we can respect others' boundaries. I'll read that again. Let me find it. Not getting angry, being understanding, negotiating reasonably when there's a disagreement on specific boundaries with good, healthy people, because even with healthy people, there will be disagreements sometimes. And being honest about how you feel and not emotionally dumping on close relationships at random times or ways we can respect others' boundaries. Checking in with others and how they're feeling about a situation if we detect hesitation, asking them honestly how they're feeling about the situation in a way to be considerate of others' needs and consider their boundaries are ways we can consider others when setting boundaries. Number 7. I think that's number 7, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, number 7. Remember, you can't save or rescue other people. Remember, you cannot save or rescue other people. So as much as we want to fix other people in situations, we can't help someone unless they want help. We can pray for them. We can be kind to them. We can set boundaries with them to set a positive example, but we cannot fix them ourselves. Only God can heal, and only people can heal if they're willing to be healed and to admit they have a problem and to do the work. So we can help someone if they ask or seem and they seem willing to keep up their side of the street or responsibility in the relationship. But relationships should always be give and take. There might be times where you're with somebody who needs more and they can't give a lot, but I mean overall they're give and take. Unless you're caring for someone who isn't able to care for themselves, like a child or someone with a disability. Even in these relationships, certain boundaries are healthy. Even then, there are certain tasks and responsibilities that are only our own and no one can do them for us, and that's okay. Number 8, reiterate your boundaries and stick by them when situations arise. Reiterate your boundaries and stick by them when the situation arises. This one is tough. Because when you're first setting boundaries, it's difficult. But you do it a little bit at a time. Be kind, but do it afraid. Perhaps start with something easier. Start setting boundaries first. Don't go straight to the worst abuser that you've ever had in your life and set a direct boundary to their face. That's hard if you've never done it. Start and gradually work your way up to more difficult. So start with someone you sense will respect your boundary first. Somebody that's really kind, and then do that for a little while. And then when you start to feel more comfortable with that, work towards more difficult people that aren't terrible, if that makes sense. And then as you build more experience with this, you can work towards those increasingly difficult people. This will remind people of your boundaries, and good people will learn to respect those as it becomes the new norm. For those that don't respect your boundaries, it might be important to set even firmer boundaries or reconsider the relationship. Number 9, all healthy people set boundaries, so work on your guilt around setting healthy and reasonable boundaries. I'll say that one again. All healthy people set boundaries, no exceptions. So work on your guilt around setting healthy and reasonable boundaries. I'll tell you, you have a right to set boundaries. You have a right to be respected. You have a right to be loved. You have a right to take care of yourself, and don't let anybody tell you you're selfish for doing that. You can still be kind to others. You can still put others first and other needs first in specific situations where we're called to love God. But you can't love other people if there's nothing of you to give. So you have to take care of yourself. And I would argue, some people would say this is not Christian, but I would argue that when you are completely traumatized, there might even be a period of your time where you have to take care of yourself first. So you talk to God about that. That's between you and God. Discern, read scripture, pray, but just think about that. All healthy set boundaries. All healthy people set boundaries. So work on your guilt around setting boundaries and reasonable healthy and reasonable boundaries. Ask yourself what you might be afraid of in setting boundaries. If you're scared of making someone angry, ask yourself why. Many of us were raised by people who were entitled to be angry, but we were not. And so that's why it's so messed up and why we feel guilty. Read the questions in Psych Central article about what you might ask yourself about fear around others' anger. So the Psych Central article is linked below, and I'm not going to read all those questions because this YouTube video is getting longer. There is a list there, and it's questions in the Psych Central article about what you may ask yourself, what you're afraid of in terms of fear around other people's anger if you set a boundary. So go find that list and read it. And then go through and journal actual honest responses in a place where nobody will find it, just between you and God. Ask God to give you insights and to bring flashes of clarity to your mind so you are totally honest and upfront about this. And those insights will give you something to work with so you can work on that stuff and learn to set boundaries and learn to identify the specific times and situations where you're more vulnerable because everybody's different. And then you can work on those areas in particular. Number 10, keep working on building your own sense of self, agency, and autonomy, and realize that your rights are just as important, but not more important, as anyone else's. I'll say that again. Keep working on building your own sense of self, agency, and autonomy, and realize that your rights are just as important, but not any more important as anyone else's. Once your rights infringe on somebody else's, then you need to really consider boundaries in terms of, am I crossing into somebody else's boundaries? And I'm afraid that we have a problem in the U.S. with that. There are a lot of people that are taking my rights a little too far. I'm not going to go too much into this, but this is my opinion. I could be wrong, but there are some people who think that their rights override other people's rights, and they don't care what your rights are, but then they'll rant and rave about their rights. That's not Christ-like. That's not biblical. We're called to respect and love other people, and part of that is to respect their boundaries and to respect them. And if we're causing them harm or problems and we're not willing to address that at all, that's not loving somebody. I'll just leave it at that. So, yeah, I won't go into it more, but that's an especially American problem where narcissism is rampant. Entitlement. And no, it's not all just the younger generation. I would argue that there's more of it in the older. And I won't say anything else. Keep working on building your own sense of self and agency. If we've been taught we're less than, we may feel our time, energy, and mental health and other inner resources are less important than others. They're not. They're not. They're just as important, and don't forget it. Your inner resources and yourself is just as important as anybody else. You're not more important, but you're just as important. Remember that. And so I wanted to go through a little bit about setting boundaries in general, give some context about it, and then go through the 10 ways to set healthy boundaries. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's blessed you. I hope it's encouraged you. I hope it's empowered you. If you haven't, click the subscribe bell and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get more encouraging and empowering videos like this one that will educate you. And also go check out the podcast if you haven't already. The link is below. You can go to Christian Emotional Recovery below, christianemotionalrecovery.com, and you can subscribe under a lot of platforms on the site. The website also has a place where you can get a free resource, Acorn. It's called Acorn, and you can get a free resource to process difficult emotions. You'll see free resource at the top of the website. Go there. You can also join the email list, which I'm hoping to have up in a few months. That will give you more exclusives and also keep you up to date with the platform. Check out Christian Emotional Recovery Facebook group, linked below as well as the podcast. Thank you so much for following this video. I hope it has informed you. I hope it has taught you that you are valuable in and of yourself. And that's not just me talking, that's God. That's biblical, and I pray that you will learn that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that means that you are an autonomous human being. Your opinion matters, your feelings matter, your rights matter. That doesn't mean that you're entitled to do whatever you want, but you have every right to set healthy boundaries for yourself in a healthy and loving way. Thank you so much for following this. Have a great day, and God bless you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Christian Emotional Recovery, hosted by Rachel Leroy. For links to this week's resources and to join the discussion, check out this episode's show notes at christianemotionalrecovery.com, where you can also find links to our YouTube channel and Facebook group. Join our email list and get other episodes and resources. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review the podcast and tell a friend who may benefit from this message. See you next time. And remember, beloveds, God loves you, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made.